She was in the middle of the road, soaked, shaking, her wheelchair half tipped into the mud, screaming into a storm that didn't care. And the man who almost drove past her? He almost kept going. But something made Ethan Caldwell hit the brakes. Maybe instinct, maybe guilt, maybe God. What he found when he stepped out of that truck would tear open a conspiracy worth $47 million and put every person he loved directly in the crosshairs of people willing to kill to keep their secret buried. This is the story of one rainy night that changed everything. Drop a comment with your city. I want to see how far the story travels. And if you're new here, hit subscribe. You're going to want to be here for every part of this. The wipers on Ethan Caldwell's pickup couldn't keep up with the rain. That was the first problem of the night. The second was Clara. "Dad, you said 7:30. Her voice came through the phone speaker clipped to his dash, tight with that particular brand of teenage disappointment that only daughters could weaponize. "I know, baby. There's something wrong with Route 9. Accident or something. I'm taking the back road through Millfield." "It's pouring, Dad." "I'm aware of the rain, Clara." "Mrs. Abernathy keeps looking at me like I'm a lost dog." "Tell Mrs. Abernathy I'll be there in 15 minutes, and I'll bring her those lemon squares she likes." A pause. Then, "She says that's not necessary, but also yes, please." Ethan almost smiled. Almost. The truth was, the smile felt like it belonged to a different man. The version of him that existed before Sarah died, before the house got too quiet, before every single evening started feeling like a room someone had just walked out of. He pressed the accelerator a little harder. Route 12 through Millfield was not technically a road anyone used after dark. It was the kind of road locals knew about and strangers got lost on. 2 lanes of cracked asphalt cutting through low farmland. No streetlights, no guardrails in half the places that needed them. Ethan knew it because he'd grown up 20 minutes from here. He knew every curve. Which is why, when his headlights caught movement on the right shoulder, he registered it a full second before his brain processed what it was. A wheelchair. Sideways. In the rain. He was past it before he fully understood what he'd seen, and then his foot hit the brake so hard that the truck fishtailed 2 feet to the left before the tires caught wet asphalt and held. "Dad? Dad, what was that?" "I'll call you back." "Dad!" He ended the call. He sat for exactly 1 second staring into his rearview mirror at the red wash of his brake lights illuminating, yes, a wheelchair, tipped at an angle against the gravel shoulder, and a person in it, or half out of it, one arm thrown up against the glare. Ethan put the truck in park and got out into the rain without his jacket. She was young. That was the first thing that hit him. Not the wheelchair, not the rain hammering down on both of them, but how young she was. Mid-20s, maybe. Dark hair plastered flat against her forehead. She was wearing a thin cardigan, soaked through to nothing, and she was shaking so hard he could see it from 6 feet away. Her right wheel had gone off the edge of the asphalt into the gravel, and the whole chair had canted sideways. She wasn't on the ground, but she was close. Her left hand gripping the armrest white-knuckled, her body angled in a way that looked like it was costing her everything just to stay upright. She looked up at him when he came around the front of the truck, and the expression on her face was not relief. It was terror. "Hey!" He put both hands up instinctively. "Hey, I'm not going to hurt you. My name is Ethan. I just want to help." She didn't say anything. Her eyes tracked him like an animal that had been cornered before. "I'm going to straighten the chair, okay? I won't touch you. I'm just going to straighten the chair." Still nothing. But she didn't pull away when he crouched down and got both hands under the right wheel and levered it back onto level ground. The chair rocked, She grabbed both armrests, and then it was stable. He stood back up, gave her space. "Can you talk to me?" he asked. "Are you hurt?" Her teeth were chattering. She blinked rain out of her eyes, and then, like something cracking open, her face went from terrified to something worse. Exhausted. Like she'd been holding herself together by a single thread, and it had just snapped. "I need—" Her voice was barely there, raspy. "I need you to— Please don't call them. Please." "Call who?" "Please, please don't call 911. Ethan looked at her for a long moment. The rain came down between them like a curtain. He was already soaked. She'd been soaked for far longer. "I'm not calling anyone," he said, "but I am getting you out of this rain. Can I put you in my truck?" She looked at the truck, looked back at him. Her jaw was still shaking. "I can't—" She stopped, started again. "My legs, I can't—" "I know. I'll carry you, if that's okay." Something shifted in her face, like the question itself, the asking, surprised her. "Okay," she said, very quietly. He lifted her carefully, one arm under her knees and one behind her back, and she weighed almost nothing, which bothered him more than anything else about the last 3 minutes. She grabbed his shoulder with one hand and held on, but didn't say a word as he opened the passenger door and got her inside. He folded the wheelchair and loaded it in the truck bed, got back in, turned the heat on, full blast. She was staring straight ahead, hands pressed flat on her thighs, still shaking. Ethan leaned back and pulled a gym towel from behind his seat. Not exactly a blanket, but it was something, and held it out to her. She took it with both hands, pressed it against her face. He waited. "How long were you out there?" he finally asked. She pulled the towel down. Her eyes were red at the edges. She hadn't been crying, or if she had, the rain had taken care of the evidence. "I don't know," she said. 2 hours? Maybe 3? 3 hours. He said it flat, not a question. "I lost track." He didn't push it. He put the truck in drive, turned the heat up another notch, and started moving slowly down Route 12. There was a gas station about 4 miles ahead, open all night. Ethan knew the owner. They could get there, get her warm, figure out the next step. 2 minutes of silence. Then she said quietly, "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," he said. "You haven't told me who I'm not calling." She turned and looked at him, really looked at him, like she was running some internal calculation. Can I trust this man? Can I afford not to? "My family," she said finally. "Your family left you on the side of Route 12 in the middle of a thunderstorm?" She turned back to face forward. "Yes." "Okay," he kept his voice steady. "And why would they do that?" Another long pause. "Because," she said, "I'm worth more to them dead." Ethan didn't react. That was the thing about 14 years in insurance fraud investigation. You developed a very specific tolerance for hearing things that would make other people flinch. You learned how to keep your hands loose on the steering wheel and your face neutral, even when someone just said something that landed like a brick through a window. He let it sit for a moment. "What's your name?" he asked. "Lena." A breath. "Lena Hartley." "Lena," he nodded slowly. "I'm Ethan Caldwell. I work insurance fraud. Private investigation mostly. And I've heard a lot of things in my life that sounded crazy and turned out to be exactly true." He glanced at her. "So I'm going to ask you something, and I want you to answer it straight." She met his eyes. "Did someone try to kill you tonight?" Her chin lifted, just slightly. "Yes." "Who?" "My stepmother, Victoria." A pause. And my stepbrother, Marcus. The gas station lights materialized ahead through the rain. Her name was Lena Hartley. She was 26 years old. She'd been in the wheelchair for 4 years. A car accident, she said, when she was 22, that severed her spinal cord at T10. She hadn't walked since, and the doctor said she probably wouldn't again. Her father was Richard Hartley. Was, past tense. He died 11 days ago. Cardiac event, the death certificate said. Peaceful, in his sleep, at home in his own bed. She didn't believe that. But she had no proof. What she did have was a phone call from her father's attorney 4 days before his death, telling her that Richard had recently updated his will and that the update was substantial. The full estate, which included a real estate portfolio, 2 businesses, and liquid assets totaling something in the neighborhood of $47 million, was to pass entirely to Lena, his only biological child. Victoria Hartley, May Victoria Crane, Richard's wife of 9 years, received a lump sum of $2 million and the rights to stay in the secondary property in Asheville for 2 years. After that, nothing. Marcus Crane, Victoria's son from her first marriage, 29 years old, who had spent the better part of a decade doing exactly nothing useful while calling himself a real estate developer, received a single payment of $500,000. After that, also nothing. Did they know? Ethan asked. They were inside the gas station now, in the small back break room where Dale, the overnight manager, and a man Ethan had known since high school, had brought them hot coffee and a spare sweatshirt he kept in his locker. About the will? Victoria found out about a week before Dad died. Lena wrapped both hands around the coffee cup. She didn't tell me she knew, but I could see it. She changed. The way she looked at me changed. What did Marcus know? Everything Victoria knew. He always does. Her jaw tightened. They're a unit. Always have been. And tonight, Ethan kept his voice even. Walk me through tonight. Lena set the coffee down, looked at her hands. Victoria told me there was a family dinner to begin the healing process after Dad's death. She said the phrase like it tasted like something rotten. Marcus offered to pick me up. That should have been my first sign. Marcus has never offered to do anything for me in 9 years. But you went. I went. A short exhale. The dinner was fine, normal, except Marcus kept refilling my wine glass, and I wasn't really tracking how much I'd had. And Victoria kept talking about what Dad would have wanted, and moving forward as a family. Her eyes hardened. Around 10, Marcus said he'd drive me home. We got in his car. He took a wrong turn, or I thought it was a wrong turn. I asked him where we were going, and he said he'd forgotten something at a client's property nearby. Where were you at this point? Out past Millfield Road. She glanced at him. Route 12. Ethan said nothing. He stopped the car and said he needed to check something in the trunk. Got out, and then she stopped. The muscle in her jaw moved. He took my wheelchair out of the trunk, set it on the road, and then he opened my door and said, "Get out." Ethan's hands were flat on the table. Did he say anything else? He said, "This is what happens when you try to take what isn't yours." She met Ethan's eyes, and then he lifted me out of the seat and put me in the chair on the side of the road, and got back in his car and drove away. The gas station hummed around them, rain on the roof, the refrigerator units buzzing behind the walls. "He left me there," she said, very quietly, like she was still trying to process the reality of it herself. "He left me on the side of Route 12, in the middle of a thunderstorm, and drove away." Dale brought them both more coffee. He didn't ask questions. That was one of the things Ethan had always appreciated about Dale. He had the particular wisdom of a man who'd worked overnight shifts long enough to understand that the most important thing you could do at 11 p.m. was pour the coffee and stay out of it. Ethan sat across from Lena and thought carefully. He knew what the right move was. Every trained instinct he had said, "Call Detective Novak, give him the story, let the professionals handle it." He also knew what happened when people in Lena's position tried to go straight to law enforcement with stories like this. He'd seen it a dozen times. Without hard evidence, without something you could put in front of a prosecutor and have them say, "Yes, this is a crime." Stories like hers got classified as civil disputes. Family drama. She said, he said. The kind of thing that dragged through the court system for years while the people with the money and the lawyers ran out the clock. And Marcus and Victoria had both. "You said you have no proof," he said. She looked up from her coffee. "I have my word." "That's not nothing. But in a courtroom, it's not enough." He drummed his fingers once on the table. "Is there anything at all, that could corroborate what happened tonight?" She thought. "There's a gas station on Route 17 before Millfield Road. Marcus stopped there on the way. He got out to get a drink. I was in the car." She paused. "He was on the phone." "I couldn't hear everything, but I heard him say, 'It's handled,' to someone. I'm almost certain it was Victoria." "A gas station with cameras," Ethan said. "Maybe. Possibly." He was already calculating. 14 years of fraud investigation had taught him that the world was covered in cameras that nobody paid attention to. He pulled out his phone, opened his notes app. "What gas station?" "Clark's. The one on 17 and Miller." He typed it in, looked up. "What about your father's estate? Is there an attorney handling it?" "Gerald Morse, in Whitmore." "Have you spoken to him since your father died?" "Once. He called to confirm the will and timeline. But since then, nothing. He's not returning my calls." She hesitated. "That worries me." It worried Ethan too, though he kept that off his face. "Is there anything in your father's house? Documents, personal records, anything that would establish his intentions regarding the will? Letters maybe, or a journal?" Something flickered in her eyes. "My father kept a journal. He'd kept one for years. It would be at the house, in his study, in the third drawer of his desk." She paused. "He always locked it, but he gave me the key a long time ago. I never used it. It felt—" She stopped. "Invasive." "Do you still have the key?" She reached into the pocket of her cardigan. Somehow still there. Somehow she'd kept it through everything. And produced a small brass key on a thin silver chain. She set it on the table between them. They both looked at it. "Victoria and Marcus are at the house," she said. "They've been staying there since Dad died." "I know." He picked up the key, turned it over once in his fingers. "That means we move carefully." Lena looked at him with an expression that was hard to read, something between gratitude and disbelief. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "You don't know me. You don't owe me anything." Ethan thought about that for a moment. He thought about Sarah, not with grief right then, but with something sharper. The memory of helplessness. The year she'd been sick and he'd sat in waiting rooms while men in suits made decisions and pushed papers across desks, and explained in very measured voices why certain things were out of his control. He'd hated that feeling more than anything in his life. "I've got a daughter," he said finally. "She's 16, and I've spent 4 years trying to teach her that the right thing to do is usually the hard thing." He set the key back down on the table, closer to Lena's side. "I'd have a hard time looking her in the face tomorrow morning if I dropped you at a shelter and went home." Lena was quiet for a moment. Then she picked the key up and pressed it into his palm. "Don't lose that," she said. "I won't." His phone buzzed. He looked down. "Clara." "Dad, where are you? It's 11 p.m." He typed back, "Coming. 20 minutes. Everything okay? Clara. Mrs. Abernathy fell asleep watching Wheel of Fortune. We're fine. Hurry up. He almost smiled again, and this time, just barely, it made it all the way. He called Clara from the truck while Lena sat quietly in the passenger seat, the borrowed sweatshirt wrapped around her, some color finally coming back to her face. Change of plans, baby. Dad, it's 11. I know. I need you to pack a bag. You and Mrs. Abernathy are going to stay at her sister's place tonight. A long pause. What happened? I'll explain everything tomorrow, I promise. He chose his next words carefully, aware of Lena 3 feet away. I found someone who needs some help, and I need to figure out how to give it. Another pause. Then Clara, 16 years old and not nearly as easy to manage as she'd been at 10, said, Is she okay? Ethan glanced at Lena. She will be. Okay. He could hear Clara already moving, pulling drawers open. Be careful, Dad. I always am. Dad. I know. I will be. He hung up, kept driving. You didn't have to do that, Lena said softly. Relocate your daughter. I know Victoria Hartley, Ethan said. It wasn't quite true. He knew of Victoria Hartley. Richard Hartley's name had come across his desk twice in the last several years, both times on the periphery of fraud investigations that had ultimately not been connected to him. But Victoria, her name had come up once in a whisper from a colleague. Careful woman. Careful and quiet. She's not going to take the night to process what happened. She's going to start planning her next move. Which is? Making sure that if you surface tonight, it doesn't look the way it actually looks. He paused. She'll have a story ready. Marcus will have a story ready. They'll say you were confused, or unstable, that you wandered off, or that you've been making accusations since your father died because you're overwhelmed with grief. Lena's jaw tightened. The perfect grieving daughter who's unraveling. It's a clean narrative. He glanced at her. Sympathy and dismissal at the same time. And if you don't have evidence, that's the one that sticks. She looked out the window at the dark moving past. Rain still coming down, softer now. My father would have believed me, she said. He always believed me. The way she said it, not for sympathy, just as a fact, hit Ethan somewhere low and quiet. He didn't say anything. Sometimes there was nothing to say. Sometimes the most respectful thing was to just hear it and let it be there. They drove. He took her to the only place that made sense, his own house. Not out of anything other than logic. It was close. It was secure. It was somewhere Victoria and Marcus wouldn't think to look because they had no reason to know Ethan Caldwell existed. Lena sat at his kitchen table while he made her a proper meal. Scrambled eggs, toast, the most aggressively uncomplicated thing he could produce at midnight. And she ate it like someone who hadn't eaten in 12 hours, which she probably hadn't. While she ate, he opened his laptop. He found Clark's gas station on 17 and Miller in under a minute. Small family operation, been there since the 1970s. Current owner, one Gerald Clark. He wrote down the number. He pulled up a real estate search and started running Richard Hartley's name through public records. Properties, assessments, transfer records. The portfolio was real, substantial. Several commercial properties in 2 counties, a residential development in progress in the northern part of the state, and a primary residence in Whitmore, estimated at $2.3 million. He searched Gerald Morse, attorney at law, Whitmore. Solid practice, been in operation for 20 years. Nothing alarming in the surface record, but the fact that he wasn't returning Lena's calls was a flag he filed away. He searched Victoria Hartley, Victoria Crane before that. Born in 1970, married Richard Hartley 9 years ago. No prior criminal record, no civil litigation in her name. 2 properties held in joint trust with Richard at the time of his death. Clean as a whistle. Which meant either she was smart, or she'd never been caught. Or both. "You're doing research," Lena said from across the table. "I am. Find anything?" "Nothing I didn't expect, which is sometimes more useful." He looked up. "Do you have a phone?" She reached into her cardigan again. "Marcus didn't take it. I think he forgot I had it. Or he didn't care. He probably thought no one would find me in time for it to matter." "Is it on?" She looked at it. "Yes." "Turn it off. Pull the SIM if you can." He watched her process that. "I'm not being paranoid. If Victoria decides to say you're missing and incapacitated, the first thing law enforcement will do is ping your phone. I'd rather control when your location becomes known." She powered it down without argument, set it face down on the table. "You're good at this," she said. "I've spent 14 years finding out when people are lying to collect money that isn't theirs." He closed the laptop. "This isn't completely different." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "Do you believe me?" It was an honest question, vulnerable in a way she'd been careful not to be until now. Holding herself together all night through something that would have made most people collapse. But here, at midnight, in a stranger's kitchen, eating scrambled eggs, she asked it straight. Ethan looked at her for a long moment. "Yes," he said. "I believe you." She didn't cry. She just nodded. Once. Small. Like someone quietly accepting a thing they'd needed to hear for a very long time. The rain finally stopped sometime around 1 in the morning. Ethan sat at his kitchen table, long after Lena was asleep in the spare room. The laptop open in front of him, the small brass key on the chain sitting next to his coffee cup, turning over in his mind everything she'd told him, like pieces of a case that hadn't fully assembled itself yet. $47 million. A dead man whose daughter didn't believe it was an accident. A stepmother who moved fast and quiet. A gas station camera that might have caught the moment everything broke open. He'd worked fraud cases that touched lives. He'd exposed lies that unraveled families, collected evidence that put people in handcuffs, testified in courtrooms under fluorescent lights, while defense attorneys tried to dismantle 14 years of careful work. He'd seen greed in all its forms. But this was different. This was a young woman in a wheelchair, left in the rain on a dark road, meant not to be found. He picked up the brass key and held it in his fist for a moment. "Don't lose that," she'd said. "I won't," he said again, quietly, to no one. He opened the laptop back up and got to work. Ethan was still at the kitchen table when the sun came up. He hadn't slept. He'd told himself he would, an hour, maybe 2, but every time he leaned back and closed his eyes, his brain kept pulling the thread. The gas station, the journal, the attorney who wouldn't answer his phone. The gap between what a death certificate says and what a daughter believes. He had 3 pages of notes by the time gray light started coming through the kitchen window. He heard movement from the spare room around 6:30. The soft roll of wheels on hardwood, a door handle, and then Lena appeared in the kitchen doorway. She'd slept in the borrowed sweatshirt. Her hair was still damp at the edges. She looked at him, then at the coffee pot, then back at him. "You didn't sleep," she said. "I slept a little." "That's a lie." "It's a small lie." He got up and poured her a cup. "How do you take it?" "Black." She rolled to the table and accepted the mug with both hands, looked at his notes. "What did you find?" "Nothing that hurts us, nothing that helps us yet." He sat back down. But I want to talk about your father's death. Not the will, the actual death. Walk me through what you know." She wrapped both hands around the mug. "He was 71. He had some heart history, a minor event about 3 years ago, nothing serious. He'd been managing it. Victoria was the one who found him. Said she woke up and he was just—" A short pause. "Gone." "Who was the attending physician?" "Dr. Franklin Reyes. He's been the family doctor for years. He signed the certificate." "Did there have to be an autopsy?" "Victoria said no. She said it would have been what Dad wanted. No intervention, no—" She used the phrase, medical theater. Lena's voice stayed steady, but her grip tightened on the mug. "He was cremated 4 days after he died." Ethan wrote that down. "Fast." "I thought so too. But Victoria said he'd always said he wanted to be cremated quickly, that he'd told her so, and I—" She stopped. "I didn't fight it. I was grieving. I didn't think—" She set the mug down. "I should have thought." "You were his daughter," Ethan said, "not an investigator. You were supposed to be grieving." "And that's exactly what they counted on." He looked at her. "Yes, it is." She nodded slowly. "So the body is gone, the certificate is signed. What does that leave us?" "The journal, the gas station footage, and the attorney." He tapped his pen against the notepad. "One of those 3 is going to crack this open. We just have to get to them first." He looked up. "I'm going to call a detective I know. His name is Novak. He works county. He's solid, and he owes me one. I want to loop him in before we do anything else. Because if we pull that footage and the journal on our own, and something breaks the wrong way legally, we hand Victoria's attorneys the exact argument they need." Lena considered that. "Do you trust him?" "Enough." "That's not a yes." "In this business, enough is as close to yes as it gets." He picked up his phone. "I'll make the call. And then I need to drive out to Clark's gas station before they rotate their security footage." "I'm coming with you." He looked at her. "Don't," she said, before he could speak. "Don't tell me to stay here. He left me on the side of a road last night because he thought I was helpless. I am not going to spend today sitting in someone's kitchen, waiting to find out if I still have a life." Ethan was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Okay." She picked her coffee back up. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. We still have to get the footage." Detective Ray Novak answered on the second ring, which meant he was already awake, which meant he was already at his desk, which was exactly what Ethan expected from a man who had been coming in an hour before his shift for the last 23 years. "Caldwell." His voice was the particular kind of flat that meant he was paying full attention. "It's 7 in the morning." "I know. I need a few minutes." "This about a case or personal?" "Both, possibly." A pause. "Talk." Ethan gave him the short version. Lena, Route 12, Marcus, the will, the intention behind it. He left out the journal and the gas station for now. He wanted to know which way Novak leaned before he handed over everything. When he finished, there was a long silence on the other end. "She can identify Marcus Crane as the individual who removed her from the vehicle and left her on the roadway," Novak said carefully. "Yes." "And her claim is that this was an intentional act intended to cause harm or death." "Yes." Another pause. "That's assault with intent at minimum, attempted homicide at max, depending on the DA's read." A beat. "Caldwell, you understand that if she files, Victoria Hartley and Marcus Crane are going to come at her hard. Lawyers, character witnesses, every resource they've got." "I know." "And you're in this, why, exactly?" Because I found her in the road and I can't put that down. Novak made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. You never could. He shifted. Ethan heard him clicking a pen. Okay, here's what I can do right now. I can't open a formal investigation without more than a verbal statement, but I can make some calls, quietly. And if you bring me something solid, I'm working on that. Then we can move. A pause. Don't do anything that poisons the evidence chain. Novak, I mean it. You're not a cop, Caldwell. You never were. Don't act like one. I'll call you this afternoon. He hung up. Across the table, Lena had been watching his face the whole call, reading it the way people did when they couldn't hear the other half of the conversation and were trying to survive on the half they could. He'll help, Ethan said. But we need to give him something he can use, which means Clark's first. Gerald Clark was 68 years old, ran the station with his son Terry, and had known Ethan since Ethan was 15 years old and working weekends pumping gas 2 miles up the road. He shook Ethan's hand at the counter and glanced at Lena in the chair beside him with the kind of careful respect that came naturally to old men who'd seen enough of the world to know you didn't ask. Security footage, Ethan said. Last night, between 9 and 10 p.m., a man came in, late 20s, about 6 feet, driving a dark blue Lexus SUV. He came in on his own, bought something, made a phone call either in the store or at the pump. Gerald scratched the back of his neck. We got cameras inside and one on the pump side. I know, that's why I'm here. Ethan, Gerald lowered his voice. I'm not supposed to hand that over without... Gerald, Ethan looked at him steadily. That man left this woman on the side of Route 12 in a rainstorm last night. He didn't say it with heat. He said it plainly, the way you say the most inarguable thing. In her wheelchair, in the rain, alone. Gerald looked at Lena. She didn't look away. He was quiet for 4 full seconds. Then he turned around and said, Terry, pull up last night's 9 to 10 on the store camera and the pump side. Copy it to a drive. From somewhere in the back. Which? Both of them. All of it. The drive from Clark's back through Whitmore took 40 minutes, and they spent most of it in a silence that wasn't uncomfortable. The particular quiet of 2 people who have moved past small talk and are now just thinking in the same direction. It was Lena who broke it. He's going to say I'm lying, she said. Marcus. He's going to have some version of last night that makes me sound unstable. Probably. He'll say I asked to be dropped off, that I was upset after dinner, that I wanted to be alone. Her voice was controlled. Victoria will back him up. She'll cry. She's good at crying. I know. He glanced at her. That's why the footage matters. If we can put his car at Clark's at the right time, with you in it, and put him on the phone, it starts to break the narrative before he can build it. And the journal? He didn't answer immediately. The journal was the piece he kept coming back to. The piece that scared him a little, if he was honest with himself. Because the journal meant going to the house. The house where Victoria and Marcus were living. And doing it quietly enough that they didn't know it was gone until it was already in Novak's hands. I need to think about the journal, he said. She turned to look at him. I can get in. Lena, it's still my father's house. Technically, under the will, it's my house. I have a right to be there. You have a legal right. That's different from it being safe. I know that. She met his eyes. But I also know the house. I know the study. I know the desk. I know exactly where it is. If you send someone else, I'm not sending anyone. I'm going myself. Then I'm going with you. She held up a hand before he could argue. Marcus is not going to physically remove me from my own father's house in broad daylight on a public street. That's a different risk calculation than a dark road at night. She paused. And Ethan, if Victoria or Marcus say anything to us, if they try to explain or lie or threaten, you need someone there who knows them, who can read them, who can tell the difference between when Victoria is managing a situation and when she's actually scared. He didn't say anything for a moment. And she will be scared, Lena said. When she sees me walk through that door, drive through that door, she is going to be terrified. And I want to see that. He understood it. He didn't entirely approve of it, but he understood it. We go in, he said. We get the journal. We don't engage unless we have to. If Marcus or Victoria try to stop us from leaving, then we have that on the record too. He nodded. Then we have that on the record too. The Hartley house was a colonial on a 2-acre lot at the end of a private drive in the north end of Whitmore. The kind of house that had been built to signal permanence. White columns, black shutters, circular drive with a fountain in the center that had been turned off for winter. Victoria's Range Rover was in the drive. Marcus's Lexus was parked behind it. Ethan sat at the end of the private drive for a moment, engine running. "You're sure about this?" he said. "No," Lena said honestly, "but I'm doing it anyway." He pulled in. The door opened before they were halfway up the walk. Victoria Hartley was 55 and carried it like a woman who had spent 55 years deciding exactly how she wanted to be perceived. She was thin in the way that took work, and well-dressed in the way that looked effortless. And she appeared in the doorway of the house with an expression that cycled, in the span of about 1 second, through shock, calculation, and then something that arranged itself carefully into grief-stricken relief. "Lena." Her voice broke with practiced precision. "Oh my God. Lena, we've been so worried." "Victoria." Lena's voice was level, clean, cold in the way that came not from cruelty, but from absolute clarity. "I'm here to collect some of my father's personal effects." A beat. Victoria's eyes slid to Ethan, cataloging him quickly, efficiently. "And you are?" "A friend," Ethan said. He kept his voice neutral and his face pleasant and his eyes on her face, reading every micro-expression like a document. "I didn't know Lena had," Victoria began. "Where is Marcus?" Lena asked. Something moved behind Victoria's eyes. Gone in a blink, but Ethan caught it. "He's not here. He went out this morning." "Lena, can we please come inside and talk? After last night..." Her voice dropped. "I've been sick with worry. I don't know what happened. Marcus said he dropped you at home. I couldn't imagine why you weren't answering your..." "He dropped me on Route 12, Lena said. "In the rain. In my wheelchair." She said each phrase like a separate sentence, a separate fact. "And then he drove away." Victoria's hand went to her chest. "Lena, that's..." "I'm going inside now," Lena said, "to my father's study." She rolled forward, and Victoria, to her credit or her terror, stepped aside. Ethan walked with Lena down the wide center hallway of the house. He clocked everything. The door to the left, the staircase, the back corridor, the second door to the right, where he could hear Victoria following them at a careful distance. He had been in a lot of houses that belonged to people who were hiding something. There was a particular quality to the air in those houses, a stillness that wasn't peaceful, a tidiness that wasn't comfortable. This house had it. The study was at the end of the hallway. Lena pushed the door open and went in. Ethan followed and positioned himself just inside the doorway, keeping one eye on the hall. He heard Victoria stop outside, not coming in, waiting. "Third drawer," Lena said softly, almost to herself. She crossed to the desk, a large mahogany piece that dominated the room, and reached for the drawer. Pulled. Locked. She produced the brass key from her pocket, slid it in, and turned it. The drawer opened. Ethan watched the hall. Victoria was still there. He could hear her breathing. "It's here," Lena said quietly. He glanced back. She was holding a hard-covered journal, dark green cloth cover, worn at the corners, the kind of book a man buys once and keeps for years. She held it with both hands, the way you hold something that belongs to someone who is gone. "Okay," he said. "Let's go." "What are you taking?" Victoria's voice from the doorway. She wasn't shouting. She was doing something much more careful. She was using the voice of a reasonable woman. Ethan turned. "Personal effects. That journal is the property of the estate. It cannot be removed without—" "The estate," Lena said, "belongs to me." She turned the chair and faced Victoria directly. "Unless you found a different will." Victoria's composure held. She was good. Ethan could see exactly how good she was. How many years it had taken to build a face that gave away nothing under pressure. But there, in the jaw, a tightness. And in the eyes, behind the careful mask, something cold and furious working very hard to stay quiet. "Lena," she said softly, "I understand you're in pain. I understand you've been saying things, making accusations, because you're overwhelmed. Your father just died. You're not thinking clearly. I forgive you for that. I do." She took a step into the room. "But what you're doing right now, taking things from this house, showing up with strangers, this is not the way to handle your grief. And if you continue, I'm going to have to make some calls." "Make them," Ethan said. Victoria looked at him. First time she'd really looked at him. "Call whoever you want," he said pleasantly. "I've actually encouraged you to call your attorney, because the conversation you're about to have with him is going to be a very important one." He smiled, not warmly. "There's security footage from Clark's gas station on 17 and Miller, from last night, about 9:15. Your son is in it." He watched her face. "You might want to know about that before you make any other decisions about what calls to make." The color in Victoria's face changed. It was the smallest thing. But Ethan had spent 14 years watching people's faces at the exact moment they understood their narrative had a hole in it. There it was. "We're going to go now," he said. "Lena?" Lena didn't say anything else to Victoria. She turned her chair and rolled out of the study, past Victoria, without looking at her. Ethan followed, kept himself between Lena and Victoria until they were through the front door and down the ramp and at the truck. He got her in, folded the chair, loaded it, got behind the wheel, started the engine. They were halfway down the private drive before either of them spoke. "That was her scared face," Lena said. "I know. She's going to call Marcus right now." "I know that too." He pulled out onto the main road, which means we have maybe 4 hours before they figure out their next move. "I'm calling Novak." His hands were steady on the wheel. His mind was moving fast. The footage, the journal, Novak, the attorney Morse who still wasn't answering. 4 pieces. He needed them moving simultaneously now, before Victoria could regroup. He looked over at Lena. She was holding the journal against her chest with both arms wrapped around it, like something she was protecting. She wasn't crying, but her jaw was tight and her eyes were fixed on the road ahead with a particular look of someone who has just done one of the hardest things they've ever done and has not yet decided how to feel about it. "You okay?" he said. "No," she said. "But I will be." He nodded. "That's good enough." He picked up his phone and dialed Novak. It rang twice. "Tell me you have something." "Footage from Clark's gas station on 17 and Miller, last night, 9 to 9:30. Marcus Crane's vehicle, with Lena Hartley inside. I'll have it to you within the hour." A pause. "And a personal journal belonging to Richard Hartley, retrieved from his study this morning. with the family present. He kept his voice even. Victoria Hartley is aware that the footage exists. She's going to move fast. Novak was quiet for exactly 2 seconds. Bring it all to me, now. Don't stop anywhere, don't talk to anyone. A beat. And Caldwell? Yeah? You did good. He hung up. Outside the window, Whitmore was waking up. Early traffic, storefronts pulling back their gates, a school bus working its route through a neighborhood that had no idea that 14 miles away, a case worth $47 million was cracking open over a brass key and a dead man's private handwriting. Ethan pressed the gas. The journal sat in Lena's arms, and somewhere behind them, Victoria Hartley was already making her calls. Novak's office was on the second floor of the county building on Garrison Street, a room that smelled like burnt coffee and old paper, and had the particular organized chaos of a man who knew exactly where everything was and didn't care how it looked to anyone else. He had a desk buried under folders, 2 whiteboards on the wall that he kept turned face in when visitors came, and a coffee maker on the windowsill that he trusted more than most people. He was standing when Ethan and Lena came in. He looked at Lena for a moment, not with pity, Ethan noticed, just with the careful attention of a man taking inventory. And then he looked at Ethan and said, "Let me see what you've got." Ethan set the USB drive from Gerald Clark on the desk. Lena set the journal next to it. Novak looked at the journal. "You touch anything inside it?" "No," Lena said. "I haven't opened it." He looked at her. "Not at all? Since you retrieved it?" "No." Her voice was steady. "It was my father's. I didn't feel right opening it without—" She stopped. "I wanted someone else to read it first. Someone who could be objective." Novak held her gaze for a moment. Then he pulled on a pair of latex gloves and picked up the journal carefully, the way you handle something that might be the most important thing in the room. He opened it to the first page, read the date at the top of the entry. "This goes back 9 years, he said. "He started it when he married Victoria," Lena said. Novak looked up at that. "I didn't know that until just now," she said quietly. "I just knew he kept it." Novak set the journal down with the same care he'd picked it up. "I'm going to need both of you to give me formal statements, separately, today." He looked at Ethan. "And I mean formal, Caldwell, on the record, not a favor." "I know." "Because once I start pulling on this, it's going to move fast, and I need the foundation solid before it does." He picked up the USB drive. "I'll get this into evidence and have my tech pull the relevant timestamps." He set it down. "What about the attorney, Morse?" "Still not returning calls," Ethan said. "Which either means he's been gotten to, or he's scared, or he's consulting his own lawyer before he opens his mouth." "None of those are good," Novak said. "No, but the third one might be workable." Ethan leaned forward slightly. "If Morse is protecting himself, that means he knows something. And if he knows something, eventually he's going to have to decide which side of this he wants to be on." Novak was quiet for a moment. Then, "I'm going to pay Gerald Morse a visit this afternoon. Professionally." He looked at Lena. "You don't contact him. You don't contact Victoria Hartley or Marcus Crane. You don't post anything. You don't call anyone who might be connected to the family. Are we clear?" "Yes," she said. "If either of them contacts you, I'll call you immediately." He nodded. "Ethan, a word." He tilted his head toward the hallway. Ethan followed him out. The door clicked shut behind them. Novak crossed his arms and dropped his voice. "How clean is this?" "It's clean. You didn't do anything at that house that I'm going to wish you hadn't done?" The journal was in a locked drawer. She had the key. She has legal standing to be in that house. There was no break-in, no coercion. Ethan met his eyes. Victoria was present. She saw us take it. Victoria was present. Novak repeated it slowly, which means she already knows the journal is gone. Yes. Which means if there's anything in it that implicates her, she's known for years what's in it. She just didn't know Lena could get to it. He paused. She looked at me differently when I mentioned the gas station footage. Ray, she knew about the stop. She knew exactly what Marcus did at Clark's and when. Whatever he said to her on that phone, she was part of it. Novak uncrossed his arms. Don't get ahead of the evidence. I'm not. I'm telling you what I saw. And I'm telling you to let me build it the right way. He looked toward the closed door. She doing okay? Ethan thought about that honestly. She's holding together. But she's been holding together since last night, and that's going to have a cost eventually. Make sure she eats something. Novak turned back toward the door. And Caldwell, until this is resolved, don't let her out of your sight. I wasn't planning to. They gave their statements in separate rooms, Ethan with Novak directly, Lena with a younger detective named Purcell, who had a careful face and a pen he kept clicking without realizing it. The statements took the better part of 2 hours. When Lena came out, she looked wrung out in the way that came not from physical exhaustion, but from the effort of going back through something terrible in precise, linear detail. Arranging it for a stranger, making sure the facts were in the right order, keeping your voice level when your body wanted to do something else entirely. Ethan handed her a coffee from the machine down the hall. She took it without a word. They sat in the corridor for a few minutes, not talking. He clicked his pen the entire time, she finally said. Purcell, is that a habit or a nervous thing? Both, I think. She almost smiled. It didn't quite land, but it almost did. He asked me to go through the part where Marcus lifted me out of the car 3 times. Ethan looked at her. You okay with that? No. She stared at the cup in her hands. But I did it anyway. She was quiet for a moment. He needed to hear it 3 times because the first time I said it too calmly. He wanted to make sure I wasn't reciting something. He wanted to see if it changed. Did it? The facts didn't change. She looked up. The 3rd time I said it, my hands were shaking. He wrote that down. She paused. I think that was the version he believed. Ethan didn't say anything. There was nothing useful to add to that. His phone buzzed. He looked at the screen. Clara. Dad, I need to know what's going on. Mrs. Abernathy says everything's fine, but her eyebrows say otherwise. He typed back, Everything is okay. I'll call you tonight. Are you at school? Clara. Yes. Dad. Yeah. Clara. Be careful. I mean it. He pocketed the phone. Lena was watching him with that particular attentiveness she had. She didn't miss things, this woman. He'd noticed that since the gas station. She watched, and she processed, and she stored things away. Your daughter? She asked. She worries. Kids who worry about their parents usually have a reason to. I know. He stood up. Come on. Novak's going to be with Morse for the next few hours. There's one more thing I want to look at. She looked up at him. What? Your father's death. He said it gently, but directly. I want to look at Dr. Reyes. Franklin Reyes had a practice on Clement Street, a 2-story building with his name on a tasteful sign and a waiting room that was always full. He was 60 years old, had been Richard Hartley's physician for over a decade, and had signed a death certificate that said, cardiac event, natural causes, no indication of foul play. Ethan wasn't going to accuse him of anything. He was going to ask him a question and watch his face answer it. He called the practice from the truck, got the receptionist. This is Ethan Caldwell. I'm calling on behalf of Lena Hartley regarding her father's recent passing. I'd like to speak with Dr. Reyes briefly. It's time sensitive. Hold. 40 seconds. Then, he can see you at 2. Ethan checked the clock on the dash. 45 minutes. We'll be there. He ended the call. Lena was looking out the window. What are you going to ask him? She said. I'm going to ask him about your father's last few appointments. What his condition looked like. Whether anything was unusual. He paused. And I'm going to ask him if anyone else called him after your father died. She turned. You think Victoria called him? I think the timing of the cremation was very fast. And the only way it happens that fast, without pushback, is if the physician on record didn't raise any flags. He kept his voice even. That's either because there was genuinely nothing to flag, or because someone called him first. She was quiet. Then, carefully, if Reyes covered something up, then he's in a very uncomfortable position, and he's known it for 11 days. Ethan looked at her, and uncomfortable people make decisions based on how scared they are versus how much worse they think it can get. We're going to help him understand how much worse it can get. You're not going to threaten him. I'm going to inform him, Ethan said. There's a difference. She looked at him for a long moment. You do this kind of thing a lot. I spend a lot of time talking to people who know more than they're saying. He pulled out of the parking spot. After 14 years, you get a feel for who's a true believer in what they're covering and who's just trying to survive it. Which one is Reyes? I don't know yet. He turned on to Clement. That's what the meeting is for. Dr. Franklin Reyes was a small man who carried himself big, the particular posture of someone who had learned early that you had to fill a room with something other than size. He shook Ethan's hand with a firm, professional grip and looked at Lena with an expression that was carefully neutral. Ms. Hartley, he said, I'm so sorry for your loss. Thank you, she said. He gestured to the chairs across from his desk. Ethan sat. Lena positioned herself beside him. You said this was time-sensitive, Reyes said, addressing Ethan more than Lena, which Ethan noted. What is it I can help you with? We're trying to understand the circumstances around Richard Hartley's death, Ethan said. Calm, factual, like he was asking about the weather. Specifically, whether anything in his condition in the weeks before his death was unusual or inconsistent with a natural cardiac event. Reyes folded his hands on the desk. I'm sure you understand that my patient's medical information is... Miss Hartley is his biological daughter and sole heir, Ethan said. She has standing to request that information. But I'm not asking you to disclose records. I'm asking you a more general question. He let a beat pass. Did anything seem off to you in the weeks before Richard died? Reyes's hands stayed folded. His face stayed neutral. But he didn't answer immediately. And that, the pause, the careful management of the pause, was everything. Richard had a history of cardiac vulnerability, Reyes said finally. His death, while sudden, was not outside the range of what I would have considered possible, given his history. That's not what I asked, Ethan said pleasantly. A longer pause this time. Doctor. Reyes, Lena said quietly. My father was 71 years old and in good health. He went to the gym 3 times a week. He had a glass of red wine with dinner and took his medication every morning without fail. I know because I called him every morning, and the first thing he always said was, "Took my pill, don't lecture me." Her voice was controlled, but the weight of it was unmistakable. He was not a man who was supposed to die in his sleep at 71. Reyes looked at her. Something shifted in his expression. The neutral mask didn't break, but it bent. His last appointment, Ethan said. When was it? 2 weeks before his death. And his condition at that appointment? Reyes was quiet for what felt like a very long time. Then he said, in a voice that was carefully smaller than his usual register. His blood work came back with an anomalous result. His potassium levels were unusually low. We discussed it. I recommended a dietary adjustment and scheduled a follow-up. Did you tell anyone else about that result? I told Richard. Did anyone else call you about it? The pause that followed that question was the longest one yet. Dr. Reyes, Ethan said, I want to be very direct with you. There is currently a police investigation being opened into the circumstances surrounding Richard Hartley's death and the events of last night, in which his daughter was left on the side of a road in a wheelchair in a rainstorm. He kept his voice completely calm. Detective Ray Novak at County is leading it. He is going to want to speak with everyone who had contact with Richard Hartley in the weeks before his death. That conversation is going to happen. The only question you have to answer right now is what version of you shows up for it. Reyes's folded hands tightened slightly. Then he unfolded them, placed them flat on the desk. Victoria Hartley called me, he said, the morning after Richard's last appointment. She asked about his test results. A pause. She said Richard had mentioned something to her about his blood work, and she was concerned. She asked specifically about the potassium levels. Lena went very still. What did you tell her? Ethan asked. I told her I couldn't discuss it without Richard's consent. She thanked me and hung up. Reyes looked at Lena, and this time the mask was fully gone. What was behind it was not guilt exactly, but something adjacent. The expression of a man who had made a small choice and had spent 11 days watching it expand into something larger than he expected. I want you to understand, I didn't think. You told her nothing she didn't tell you she already knew, Ethan said. Not to absolve him, just to keep him talking. She called with the information already in hand. Yes. He looked down at his desk. She called me again after Richard died, to tell me personally. And she said that Richard had been under a lot of stress and that she was grateful for everything I'd done for him. His jaw moved. It felt like something at the time. I told myself I was reading too much into it. What did it feel like? Lena asked. Her voice was very quiet. Reyes looked at her. Like a thank you, he said, for not asking questions. The room held that for a moment. I signed the certificate, he said. The symptoms were consistent with cardiac arrest. I had no reason at the time to. He stopped, started again. I should have requested an autopsy. I know that now. I told myself it wasn't necessary because everything was consistent with his history. But the truth is, he stopped again. The truth is, Ethan said carefully, that you got a call from his wife the morning after you found an anomaly, and then 2 weeks later, he was dead. And she called you again to make sure you felt like you were on the same team. Reyes said nothing, which was its own answer. You're going to call Novak today, Ethan said. This afternoon. You're going to tell him everything you just told us. The blood work results, both calls from Victoria, all of it. He stood up. You have his number? I can find it. You have it by this afternoon, or he comes to you. He picked up his jacket. Either way, he's going to hear from you today. Reyes nodded. Once, small, the way someone nods when they've run out of other options. Ethan looked at Lena. She was looking at Reyes, and her expression was something complicated. Not angry, not satisfied. Something that was just beginning to understand the full shape of what had been done to her father. Dr. Reyes, she said, very quietly. Did he suffer? Reyes held her gaze. No, he said. Whatever happened, he didn't suffer. She nodded once, the way Ethan had seen her nod before, accepting a thing, filing it, moving forward. Thank you, she said. And they left. Back in the truck, She didn't speak for several blocks. Ethan gave her the silence. He drove without a destination for a few minutes, heading generally toward the diner on Marsh Street, where he knew they could sit in a corner booth and think. "Low potassium," she said finally. "It's called hypokalemia," Ethan said. "In large doses, it can cause cardiac arrest. It's also naturally occurring in small amounts, which makes it very difficult to detect post-mortem, unless you're specifically looking for it." He glanced at her. "It wouldn't show up as unusual in a general autopsy. You'd have to run a specific panel." She absorbed that. She knew about the appointment. She knew about the blood work result because your father told her. And then she used it. He paused. "Lena, this is the part where I need you to hear me. What I just said is a theory. It's a very well-supported theory, and Novak is going to pursue it. But the body is gone. The cremation happened 4 days after death, whatever physical evidence there might have been. It's gone," she said. "It might be, but the pattern is there. The call to Reyes, the abnormal blood work, the fast cremation, the will. Last night." He stopped. "Patterns matter. Patterns tell a story even when the physical evidence is gone." She was quiet for a moment. "She killed him," she said. Not as an accusation, not as a question, just as a fact she was processing. "She killed my father for his money, and then she tried to kill me. And she's been in that house for 11 days acting like a grieving widow." That's what the evidence is pointing toward. "And Marcus helped her." Or, at minimum, knew. She pressed the back of her hand against her mouth for a moment. Then she dropped it. "I want her in a cell." "I know." "I want her standing in front of a judge with nowhere to go." "I know. And we're getting there." He pulled into the diner parking lot. "But right now, I need you to eat something, because Novak is going to call within a few hours, and when he does, we're going to need to be ready to move on whatever he found in that journal. And I need you sharp." She looked at the diner, then back at him. "You remind me of my father," she said. "He was always telling me to eat when I was upset." "Smart man." "He was." She looked down at her hands. "He really was." She said it the way you say something you need to say out loud once. Not for anyone else, just to put it in the air, to make it real. Ethan heard it and didn't try to respond to it, because some things don't need a response. They just need to be heard. He got out of the truck and came around and got her chair from the bed. His phone rang. He looked at the screen. Novak. He answered. "Tell me." "I have the journal open in front of me." Novak's voice was different than it had been this morning. Tighter. Focused in the way Ethan had heard it go right before something broke. Caldwell. Richard Hartley suspected Victoria of financial manipulation as far back as 4 years ago. He wrote about it repeatedly. He wrote about confronting her. He wrote about changing his will. A pause. And he wrote about something else. Ethan went still. What? He wrote that approximately 8 months ago, he found medication in the house that didn't belong to him. He didn't know what it was. He wrote down the name. Ethan's hand tightened on the phone. What was the name? Novak said it. Ethan knew it. Any fraud investigator who worked insurance cases involving suspicious deaths knew it. It was a digitalis compound, a cardiac glycoside. In therapeutic doses, used to treat heart failure. In elevated, unmonitored doses, it caused severe drops in potassium and electrolytes. It caused arrhythmia. It caused cardiac arrest. It was tasteless. It was odorless. And it was almost completely untraceable after cremation. Ray, Ethan said carefully. Yeah. What's the date on that entry? 8 months ago, November 14th. A pause. Ethan, he was scared when he wrote this. You can hear it even in the handwriting. He wrote that he confronted Victoria about the medication, and she said it was an old prescription she'd forgotten about. He wrote that he believed her. Another pause. He wrote that he wanted to believe her. Lena was watching his face. She couldn't hear the call, but she was reading him, the way she had been reading him since they first sat across a table at Dale's gas station in the middle of the night. She already knew, before he said a word. He lowered the phone from his ear. "Your father knew," he said. Not loud, not soft, just real. Not everything, but he knew something was wrong. He didn't let himself follow it all the way. Her eyes didn't fill. They just went very still and very deep, the way eyes go when something settles into its final shape and there is no more uncertainty left to hide behind. He loved her, she said. Even at the end, he still loved her. Yes. That's how she did it. Her voice was barely above a whisper. That's the whole answer, isn't it? She stayed inside his love until she didn't need it anymore. Ethan looked at her and had nothing to offer except the truth of what she just said, which was complete and terrible and didn't need anything added to it. He raised the phone back up. "Novak, we're coming to you." "How fast?" 20 minutes. "Make it 15, Novak said, because Marcus Crane just showed up at the county building. Ethan's jaw tightened. "Is he under arrest?" "Not yet. He walked in voluntarily with an attorney." A pause. "He's getting ahead of it. He's going to give us his version of last night before we can give him ours." Ethan was already moving. "We're on our way." He looked at Lena. "Change of plans. Food can wait." She was already reaching for her wheels. "I heard." "He's going to have a story," Ethan said, pulling open the truck door. "A clean one, with details." "I know." She looked up at him as he lifted her in. "Let him tell it." Something in her voice had shifted. Not hard, not angry, but absolutely, completely certain. "Because then he's committed to it, and then we take it apart." Marcus Crane was sitting in a chair outside Novak's office when Ethan and Lena came through the door, and the first thing he did when he saw Lena was stand up. Not out of respect, out of reflex. The reflex of a man who had expected to walk into a building and control a narrative and has just realized the person he most needed to not be here is already here. His attorney, a trim man in a gray suit who had the particular stillness of someone billing by the hour and intending to stay very calm, put a hand on Marcus's arm. Marcus sat back down. He was 29, broad-shouldered, and had the kind of face that had probably gotten him out of trouble his whole life. Easy smile, good jaw, the practiced look of a man accustomed to being believed. He was not smiling now. Lena stopped her chair in the middle of the hallway and looked at him. She didn't say a word. Marcus looked away first. Novak appeared in his doorway. He took in the hallway. Ethan, Lena, Marcus, the attorney, with the practiced calm of a man who had managed worse rooms. "Ms. Hartley, Caldwell." He held his door open. "Come in." The attorney cleared his throat. "Detective, my client was here first." "Your client can wait," Novak said pleasantly, and closed the door. He'd already read most of the journal. He had it open on his desk, with small evidence tabs marking specific pages, and he transferred key passages into a typed document that he slid across to Ethan without a word. Ethan read it, passed it to Lena. She read it slowly. Her eyes moved down the page without expression, but her hand on the paper tightened once, at the entry from 14 months ago, when Richard had written, in the careful cursive of a man choosing his words deliberately, "I wonder sometimes if she is patient with me because she loves me, or because she is waiting for something." I pushed the thought away. I do not want to be the kind of man who cannot trust. Lena set the paper down. "He knew," she said again, quietly. "He kept knowing, and kept pushing it away." 11 entries over 4 years, Novak said. Concerns about unexplained withdrawals from a joint account. Questions about a medication he found. Notes about Marcus pressuring him on 2 separate real estate deals, both of which, I checked, transferred partial ownership to a shell company I'm having my financial crimes contact run down right now. They were already taking from him, Ethan said, before he died. The estate was the endgame, but they were already working the edges. That's how it reads. Novak leaned back. The last entry is dated 9 days before his death. You want to know what it says? Lena looked at him. Yes. Novak turned the journal to the last tabbed page and read aloud, his voice flat and careful, the voice of a man delivering testimony rather than feeling it. I have changed the will. Gerald has the signed documents. Whatever Victoria's intentions have been, whatever Marcus has been doing with the accounts, it ends with me. Lena will have everything. She will be protected. I am sorry I waited so long to be sure. He looked up. I am sorry I waited so long to be sure. The room was very quiet. Lena's jaw worked once. She put her hand flat on the desk and kept it there. He did it, she said. He knew, and he finally did something about it. 9 days before he died, Ethan said. 9 days. Novak closed the journal, which means the timeline is this. Richard changes the will. Victoria finds out, from the attorney's office, from Richard himself, or from someone she'd compromised along the way. And 11 days later, Richard is dead of what gets signed off as a natural cardiac event. He looked at both of them. Now out in my hallway, I have Marcus Crane with an attorney, which tells me Victoria moved fast this morning after your visit and got her ducks in a row. Marcus is here to tell me a story. He picked up a pen. I want to hear his story before I tell him what we have. I want him committed to every detail. Lena said the same thing in the parking lot, Ethan said. Novak looked at her. Smart. My father raised me, she said. Novak kept them in his office while he went to take Marcus's statement in the room down the hall. He told them not to move, which neither of them had any intention of doing. While they waited, Ethan's phone rang. Unknown number, but a local area code. He answered. Mr. Caldwell. The voice was older, careful. This is Gerald Morse. Ethan sat up slightly. Across from him, Lena went still. Mr. Morse, Ethan said evenly, I've been hoping to hear from you. I imagine you have. A pause. I spoke with Detective Novak this afternoon about the will and the timeline. Another pause. Longer. I want you to understand something. I have been Richard Hartley's attorney for 17 years. I knew him before he married Victoria Crane. I knew him when he was healthy and when he was not. And I knew him when he was happy, which he genuinely was for several years of that marriage. His voice carried the weight of a man who was doing something that cost him something. But in the last year, I was worried. He seemed diminished. He seemed like a man who was carrying something he hadn't been carrying before. And when he came to me about the will change, he told me specifically that he did not want Victoria to be present for any part of the process. Ethan said nothing. He let the man talk. He told me something, Morse said. On the day he signed the updated will, he told me that he believed someone in his home meant to harm him. He didn't use her name. He told me he hoped he was wrong. He told me that if anything happened to him before he had a chance to clarify things with his family, he wanted Lena to call me immediately. He gave me a sealed letter to hold for her. A pause. I've had that letter for 9 weeks. And then Richard died, and Victoria called me within 6 hours of his death, and she was not a grieving woman, Mr. Caldwell. She was a woman taking inventory. And you got scared, Ethan said. Not as an accusation. I got scared, Morse confirmed quietly. I have a practice, a family. I told myself to wait and see, that I might be misreading it. A long exhale. I am not going to be able to live with that decision the way it has been sitting on me. So, I have the letter. I have also retained copies of all documentation related to the Hartley estate, including communications from Victoria's attorneys in the week following Richard's death, which I think Detective Novak will find instructive. Mr. Morse. Ethan looked at Lena, who was reading his face again. Can you come to the county building today? I'm in the parking lot, Morse said simply. I've been sitting here for 20 minutes, trying to decide if I was doing the right thing. You are, Ethan said. Come inside and ask for Novak. Tell him you have documentation and a sealed letter for Lena Hartley. He'll take it from there. A pause. Is she there, Lena? Ethan held the phone out. Lena took it. Mr. Morse, she said. Lena. The old man's voice cracked, just slightly, on her name. I am so sorry. I should have called you the day he died. I should have. You're calling now, she said. That's what matters. Please come inside. She handed the phone back. Ethan told Morse which entrance to use and hung up. Lena looked at the journal on Novak's desk. My father left me a letter, she said, mostly to herself. Sounds like it. He thought something might happen to him. He was scared enough to prepare for it, and he still... She stopped. He still didn't leave her. He still stayed in that house with her. Ethan watched her face work through it. He was trying to protect me from a safe distance, she said. He was trying to do it without a fight, without a scene. Her voice was not quite steady. That's so exactly like him, I can't even... He would rather handle something quietly than put anyone through a confrontation. Even at the cost of himself, Ethan said. Yes, she looked up. That's who she picked. She found a good man, and she picked him because good men try to manage things quietly. Ethan didn't say anything. He thought about Sarah, which he tried not to do during work because it wasn't useful. But it came anyway. He thought about how she used to say that the most dangerous thing about good people was that they assumed everyone else was operating in good faith too. It's not naivety, she'd said once. It's generosity, and sometimes the world charges you for it. He thought Richard Hartley had been charged everything. He heard voices in the hallway outside. Morse, he guessed, being brought back. And then footsteps going the other direction. Marcus and his attorney being moved to a different room. The building was assembling itself around a case that was finally, fully in motion. Novak came back 22 minutes later. He came in, closed the door, sat down, and put his hands flat on the desk. Marcus's story, he said, is that Lena asked to be dropped at the junction of Route 12 and Miller Road because she wanted some air. She was upset after dinner. She wanted to be alone. He was reluctant, but she insisted. He dropped her. He drove away. He assumed she called a car or a friend. He left a wheelchair-dependent woman on a rural road in a thunderstorm, Ethan said. He says he offered to stay, and she told him to go. He says she was agitated, and he didn't want to upset her further. Novak's voice was completely neutral. He says she's been making unstable accusations since Richard's death, and that the family is worried about her mental state. His attorney has a letter, written today, coincidentally, from a psychiatrist named Ellison, who apparently treated Lena briefly 2 years ago, suggesting a pattern of emotional disturbance under stress. Lena made a sound that was not quite a laugh. I saw Dr. Ellison for 8 sessions after my accident, because I was paralyzed at 22. She looked at Novak directly. I stopped seeing him because he kept suggesting my grief about not walking again was an overreaction to a manageable situation. I'm going to need his name and contact information, Novak said, writing it down. Because pulling a letter from a treating psychiatrist without patient consent is its own problem. He capped his pen. Now, the footage from Clark's. His laptop was open. He turned it toward them. The timestamp read 9:17 p.m. The camera angle was from above the register, angled toward the door. It caught the pumps through the front window and the store interior clearly. Marcus came in at 9:17, grabbed a bottle of water from the cooler, and took out his phone before he even got to the register. His mouth was moving. The call lasted just over 4 minutes. We can't hear it, Novak said. But I have a subpoena for his phone records going out within the hour. If that call goes to Victoria's number... It goes to Victoria's number, Lena said. I heard him say, it's handled, which at 9:17 p.m., Ethan said, means before he dropped her on Route 12. He was calling ahead of the act. That's how the DA will read it, Novak said. Premeditation. Not a spontaneous decision. Not a response to her being upset at dinner. A call to confirm a plan that was already in place. He turned the laptop back. Marcus's story just became a very expensive mistake. He looked at them. Morse is here? In the building, Ethan said. The letter? Sealed. For Lena. Novak looked at Lena. I need to be present when that letter is opened. It may be material evidence. He paused. But it is your letter, from your father, and I will step out if you need a moment. She shook her head. Open it here, with everyone in the room. She held his gaze. My father wrote it so it would be used. Let's use it. Gerald Morse was a tall man who had aged into the kind of thin that came from decades of sitting under fluorescent lights, carrying other people's legal weight. He shook Lena's hand with both of his and held on for just a moment longer than a professional handshake required, and she let him. He produced the letter from the inside pocket of his coat, a standard white envelope, sealed, with Lena's name written on it in Richard Hartley's handwriting. Just her name, nothing else. Novak put on gloves and slid it carefully, unfolded the pages inside, passed them to Lena. She read it. Ethan watched her face. It took her 4 minutes. Toward the end, her eyes went bright, not spilling over, just bright, the way eyes get when the body is holding something that is too large for it. She finished, set the pages down, and pressed her thumb and forefinger against the bridge of her nose for a moment. He knew, she said, for the 3rd time since this morning. But this time it was different. Not grief, and not anger. Something that was almost relief. Because knowing meant he hadn't been fooled all the way to the end. Knowing meant he'd seen clearly enough to try to protect her. He laid it all out. The medication, the accounts, a specific date when he found a receipt in Marcus's name for a property that should have belonged to the estate. He says he didn't go to the police because he had no proof, and he was afraid they wouldn't believe him over Victoria. A pause. And he says, her voice caught just once, and she steadied it. He says he's sorry he didn't tell me sooner. He says he was trying to protect me from the ugliness of it for as long as he could. She looked up at Ethan when she said that. He held her gaze and didn't look away. He was a good man, she said. Not a naive one. A good one. There's a difference. There is, Ethan said. Novak was already on his phone. He stepped to the corner of the room, voice low. Ethan could pick out fragments. Financial crimes, search warrant, Hartley residence. And he understood the machine had fully engaged now. All the pieces they'd spent 36 sleepless hours assembling were becoming something that moved on its own momentum. Morse was sitting in the corner, looking at his hands with the expression of a man who has put something down he's been carrying too long. Lena was holding her father's letter. Ethan's phone buzzed. Clara again. "Dad, please call me when you can. Not an emergency. I just want to hear your voice." He looked at it for a moment. Then he typed, "Give me an hour. I love you." Clara. "I love you too. Also, Mrs. Abernathy wants to know if you want her lemon square recipe." He almost laughed. All the way this time. "What?" Lena said, watching him. "My daughter." He pocketed the phone. "She keeps me sane." "She sounds like she learned that from someone." He looked at her. She was still holding the letter, and her face was tired in the deep way that went past one sleepless night, the way that came from years of something, from being left in the rain, not just once, but in smaller ways, 100 times, by people who should have stayed. And she was still here, still upright, still sharp. He thought about what she'd said in the truck that morning. "I am not going to spend today sitting in someone's kitchen, waiting to find out if I still have a life." She hadn't. She'd driven into the house where her father died and walked out with the one thing that could tell the truth about it. She'd sat in a fluorescent room and told a stranger with a clicking pen what it felt like to be lifted out of a car and left in the dark. She'd sat across from the doctor who'd failed her father and held herself together enough to ask the one question that mattered. She'd done all of that in 18 hours. Novak came back from the corner. "Search warrant for the Hartley residence is in motion. Financial Crimes is running the shell company. And I have a call in to the state medical examiner about the possibility of a secondary review on the death certificate, even given the cremation. There may be records, pharmaceutical receipts, a paper trail we can use." He looked at both of them. Victoria Hartley is about to have a very different afternoon than she planned. "Where is she now?" Ethan asked. "Home, as far as we know. Marcus is still in the building. His attorney is reviewing the situation, and I suspect they are having a very frank conversation about cooperation." "Will he turn on her?" Lena asked. Novak considered. "Marcus Crane struck me, in that room, as a man who did not fully think through what he was walking into this morning. He came in expecting to plant a story and walk out ahead of it. He did not come in expecting gas station footage, a journal, and a letter from a dead man." He paused. "People like Marcus cooperate when the math changes. The math just changed." "Victoria won't cooperate," Lena said. "She doesn't break. She just recalculates." "I know," Novak said. "That's why the warrant matters more than Marcus." He looked at Ethan. "I need both of you available by phone for the next several hours. Don't go far." Ethan nodded. He looked at Lena. "Come on," he said. "I owe you a meal." She looked up at him with an expression that was still complicated, and probably would be for a long time to come. "I'm not hungry." "I didn't ask if you were hungry." A beat. "Fine," she said. They left Morse with Novak, walked, rolled, down the hallway past the room where Marcus was sitting with his attorney. The door closed, voices inaudible. Past the front desk and out into the afternoon, where the sky had gone the particular clear, pale blue that only came after a full night of rain had washed everything. Ethan held the truck door, and Lena looked out at the sky for just a moment before getting in. "He saw this kind of sky," she said, "after a rain. He always said it was the world's way of starting over." "Smart man," Ethan said. The same thing he'd said about her father once before. He really was, she said, the same way she'd said it before. But something in it was different now. Not present tense grief. Something more like preservation, holding the true shape of him before the world tried to rewrite it. Ethan closed the door and went around to the driver's side and got in. His phone buzzed one more time. Novak, a text. Marcus's phone records just came in. 9:17 p.m. Call lasted 4 minutes 11 seconds. Number belongs to Victoria Hartley's personal cell. He read it, set the phone face down on the seat. Good news? Lena asked. The kind that matters, he said, and started the truck. The diner on Marsh Street had a corner booth that Ethan had been sitting in on and off for the better part of 20 years. It was the kind of place that hadn't changed its menu since 1987 and wasn't planning to. Red vinyl seats, coffee that came in a pot you kept on the table, pie under a glass dome at the counter. The kind of place where nobody bothered you and the noise level was exactly right for thinking. He ordered eggs and toast for both of them without asking. Lena didn't argue. They ate in the particular silence of two people who had been moving at full speed for 36 hours and were allowing themselves, for the first time, to simply stop. The food helped. It always did. Ethan had learned that early in his career, that the body kept its own accounting, separate from everything else, and that you ignored it at the cost of the decisions you made in the next hour. He was halfway through his coffee when Lena said, "What happens now?" Novak executes the warrant. His team goes through the house, financials, pharmacy records, any medication on the property. They'll look for the compound your father named in the journal. Even if the physical evidence from his death is gone, if they find it in the house, it establishes access and intent. He set the cup down. Marcus's phone records confirm the call to Victoria at 9:17. That's conspiracy. His attorney is going to spend the next 24 hours explaining to him that the window for a cooperation deal closes fast. And Victoria? Victoria is going to lawyer up hard and say nothing. That's what people like her do. They go quiet and make the state prove every inch of it. He looked at her. Which is why the journal matters. Which is why your father's letter matters. Which is why Reyes calling Novak this afternoon matters. You build a case like a wall. Each piece holds the next one up. And right now that wall is getting very solid, very fast. Lena pushed a piece of toast around her plate. What if it's not enough? What if Marcus cooperates on last night, but the rest of it, my father, what if they can't prove it? They may not be able to prove the homicide beyond a reasonable doubt, Ethan said, honestly. The physical evidence is gone. But here's what they can prove. Fraud, conspiracy, financial manipulation over a period of years, and a direct attempt on your life, on a dark road, witnessed by a gas station camera and corroborated by a phone record. He held her gaze. Victoria Hartley is not walking away from this. The degree of what she's charged with may depend on what Marcus gives up, but she is not walking away. Lena was quiet for a moment. My father deserves more than fraud charges. I know. He didn't offer her comfort that wasn't true. And Novak knows that too. He's going to push as far as the evidence lets him go. But Lena, your father also left a journal that survived her. He left a letter that survived her. He left a will that she couldn't change and a daughter she couldn't stop. He paused. She didn't win. Whatever she took from him, she didn't win. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she picked up her toast and ate it. Novak called at 6:47 p.m. Ethan was sitting on the front steps of his house. He brought Lena back here after the diner. Clara had come home from Mrs. Abernathy's, and the three of them had existed in the same space in the quiet, slightly awkward way of people who had been thrown together by circumstances rather than choice, and were slowly finding their footing with each other. Clara had offered Lena a blanket without being asked, which Ethan noted, and Lena had asked Clara about school with the genuine attention of someone who actually wanted to know, not just fill silence, which Clara had noticed too. Ethan could see it in the way his daughter's posture changed from careful to something more open. He stepped outside to take the call. "We're in the house," Novak said. No preamble. "Ethan, in the master bathroom, in a vanity cabinet behind a false back panel. Behind a false back panel. We found 2 bottles. Digoxin and a compound that matches what Richard named in the journal, along with a dosing schedule written in Victoria's handwriting." Ethan sat down on the step. A dosing schedule. Dates, quantities, administration notes. Novak's voice was steady, but underneath it was the tight energy of a man who had been doing this for 23 years and still felt it when the thing cracked open all the way. "She kept records, Caldwell. She kept records because she needed to manage the dosing carefully enough that it wouldn't look acute. She was medicating him slowly over a period of months." A pause. "She is meticulous, and that meticulousness just put her in a cell." Ethan pressed the heel of his hand against his forehead. "She's in custody?" "Being taken in now. Her attorney is already on the phone screaming, which I find reassuring because it means we have something worth screaming about." A beat. "Marcus agreed to cooperate 40 minutes ago. His attorney accepted the deal. He's giving us everything. His role in last night, full confirmation that Victoria planned and directed both the attempt on Lena and the long-term administration of the medication. He says he didn't know about the medication until 2 months ago, and he said nothing because Victoria told him if he did, she'd find a way to make him the primary." Novak paused. "I believe about 60% of that. The DA will believe 30. But it doesn't matter what we believe about Marcus. What he gives us is enough." Novak. "Yeah? Good work." A short exhale that wasn't quite a laugh. "You did the grunt work. I just had the badge." A pause. "Tell her." Ethan hung up and sat on the step for a moment. The evening was cool and still, and the neighborhood was doing its ordinary evening things. A dog being walked, someone's sprinklers running, a kid on a bike 3 houses down. The completely ordinary texture of a world that had no idea what had just happened 14 miles away in a colonial house at the end of a private drive. He went back inside. Lena was at the kitchen table. Clara was across from her, telling some story about her history teacher with the animated energy of a teenager who had decided she trusted the person she was talking to. Lena was listening with her chin resting on her hand, actually smiling at something Clara had just said. It was the first real smile Ethan had seen from her. Full, unguarded, lit from the inside. He stood in the doorway for a moment before either of them saw him. Then Lena looked up, and she read his face the way she had been reading his face for the last 36 hours. Quickly, completely, like a language she'd always known. Her smile changed, became something else, something much deeper and much more fragile at the same time. "Clara," Ethan said, "can you give us a few minutes?" Clara looked between them with the perceptiveness of a 16-year-old who had lived 4 years with a father who worked difficult cases and had learned what the shift in a room felt like. "Yeah," she said quietly, and took her phone and went. Ethan sat down across from Lena. "They found it," she said, not a question. "In a hidden panel in the master bathroom, a dosing schedule in Victoria's handwriting." He held her gaze. "She's in custody. Marcus is cooperating." Lena's face went very still, the kind of still that wasn't emptiness, but capacity, a container holding more than it was built for. "She killed him," she said. "Yes." "And they can prove it." "Yes." She pressed both hands flat on the table. She looked at them. She breathed, one breath, slow, controlled. The breath of someone making a deliberate choice not to come apart in a kitchen when there was still more ground to stand on. "My father," she said, "spent the last year of his life scared, in his own house, next to the woman who was slowly poisoning him, and he still protected me. He changed that will. He wrote that journal. He left me that letter, and he did all of it alone because he was trying to keep the ugliness away from me." Her voice was not breaking. It was bearing weight the way good structures bear weight, bending slightly, holding completely. "And I want to be angry at him for that, for not calling me, for not just picking up the phone." She looked up. "But I can't be, because that's just who he was. He carried things so other people wouldn't have to." "I know," Ethan said. "You do that too," she said. "You know that?" He didn't answer that immediately. "Clara told me about her mother," Lena said. "While you were on the phone. She didn't say much, just that she died 4 years ago and that you've been doing everything since then." She paused. "She said you make her lunch every single morning, that you've done it every day since her mother died, even on the days when you're exhausted, even when you're on a hard case." She looked at him. "She said she keeps telling you she's old enough to make her own lunch, and you keep doing it anyway." Ethan looked at the table. "Because it's the thing you can do," Lena said. "Every day, the thing you can do." He cleared his throat. "She told you a lot." "She likes to talk." A pause. "She's remarkable, Ethan." "I know. She learned that from someone." He looked up. Lena was watching him with that complete attention of hers. Not soft, not pitying, just fully present in the way that very few people ever manage to be. Like she saw the thing clearly and wasn't afraid of it. "Thank you," she said, "for not driving past me on Route 12. I almost did. But you didn't." "No," he said, "I didn't." The weeks that followed moved in 2 registers simultaneously. The slow grind of legal process and the quieter, stranger work of Lena beginning to rebuild the shape of a life that had been under siege for years without her fully knowing it. Victoria Hartley was formally charged with first-degree murder in the death of Richard Hartley, conspiracy to commit murder in the attempted killing of Lena, financial fraud across multiple counts, and criminal elder abuse. Her attorney entered a not guilty plea with a particular aggression of a very expensive lawyer who understood that the evidence was severe and that aggression was the only remaining strategy. Marcus Crane pleaded guilty to aggravated assault, conspiracy, and accessory charges in exchange for his cooperation and a sentence that his attorney negotiated down to 7 years. He gave his statement without looking at Victoria in the courtroom. She did not look at him either. Gerald Morse voluntarily surrendered his practice license pending review and provided full cooperation to the prosecution. The review board ultimately allowed him to keep his license with a formal censure. He sent Lena a letter 3 weeks after Victoria's arrest that she read once and kept in the same box as her father's letter. Dr. Franklin Reyes went before the state medical board. He did not lose his license. He did, however, request early retirement and submitted it before the board finished their review. Ethan heard from Novak that Reyes had written a formal apology to Lena, which she received and chose not to respond to, which was her right and which Ethan understood completely. The estate moved through probate, with Gerald Morse's full documentation intact. $47 million, 2 businesses, and a real estate portfolio. All of it to Lena Hartley, as Richard had written, as he had intended, as he had fought quietly and alone to make certain. She sat in Gerald Morse's office on the day the final transfer was confirmed, and she was very quiet for a long time. Morse waited. He was good at waiting, Ethan thought. It was probably the most useful skill a man in his position could have. He did everything right, Lena said finally. Everything he could do from inside that situation, he did. He did, Morse agreed. I want to do something with it. She looked at the numbers on the page in front of her, and then looked away from them, because the numbers were not the point. Something he would have wanted. Something that... I don't want this money to just sit there being the thing Victoria tried to take. I want it to be something. Ethan, sitting beside her, didn't offer a suggestion. This was her decision. Her father's money, her father's legacy, her choice entirely. She thought about it for a long moment. He believed in people who carried things alone, she said. Like me. Like the people who got dealt something hard and had to figure out how to live inside it without a lot of help. She looked at Morse. I want to set something up, a foundation, for people with spinal cord injuries and disabilities. Not medical research, there's money for that already. I mean the living part, the figuring out how to have a life part. The part nobody funds because it's not dramatic enough. She paused. That's what he would have wanted. Morse nodded slowly. I'll draw up the paperwork. Good. She folded her hands on the desk. And I want it in his name. Victoria Hartley's trial took 11 months from indictment to verdict. Ethan testified on day 4. He sat in the witness box in the same careful way he had sat in witness boxes for 14 years. Hands loose, voice even, eyes on the attorney asking the questions. And he told the jury exactly what he had seen on Route 12 on a rainy night, what he had found when he got out of his truck, and what had followed. He did not editorialize. He did not perform. He just told the truth in the plainest language he knew how to use, and let it be what it was. Lena testified on day 7. She was in the wheelchair, which she had been in for 4 years, and which she navigated with the matter-of-fact competence of someone who had long ago made peace with the logistics of her life, even when the life itself was not easy. She sat in the box and she answered every question directly. And when Victoria's defense attorney tried to introduce Dr. Ellison's letter about emotional instability, the prosecutor was on her feet before the sentence was finished, and the judge sustained the objection without deliberation. Ethan watched Lena from the gallery. He watched her hold herself in that room, in front of Victoria, who sat at the defense table in gray and said nothing, and looked at nothing. And he thought about Route 12, about a woman in a wheelchair in the rain with her hand up against headlights, terrified, and how far she had traveled in 11 months from that roadside to this courtroom, to this moment. She didn't look at Victoria once during her testimony, not because she was afraid of her, because Victoria Hartley was not worth the energy of her gaze. The jury deliberated for 9 hours. Guilty on all counts. Ethan heard Lena exhale from 4 seats away when the verdict was read. One breath, long, complete. The sound of a weight being finally, fully put down. He didn't look at her. He just let her have it. Outside the courthouse afterward, in the late afternoon light, Clara was waiting on the steps. She'd asked to come. Ethan had said yes because she was 16 and had lived inside this case for 11 months and deserved to see how it ended. She didn't say anything when Lena came out. She just stepped forward and put her arms around her. A 16-year-old girl and a 27-year-old woman who had arrived in each other's lives through the worst kind of accident and had somehow, in the months between that rainy road and this courthouse step, become something that didn't have a clean name, but was real and solid and worth keeping. Lena held on. Clara held on. Ethan stood a few feet back and looked at the sky, which was the same pale, clear blue it had been the afternoon they'd walked out of Novak's building, with the phone records confirmed and the case finally moving. The blue that came after rain, that his father had told him once, meant the world was starting over. He let himself feel it. Not triumph. It wasn't triumph. Richard Hartley was still gone. The year Lena had spent not knowing exactly what had happened to him was still real. The night on Route 12 was still real. None of that went away because 12 people in a jury box said the right word. But Victoria Hartley was going to prison for the rest of her functional life. Marcus was going to spend 7 years accounting for what he'd done. The estate, Richard's work, Richard's life's work, was going to become something that helped people he never met and would have wanted to help anyway, because that was the kind of man he was. And Lena was standing on courthouse steps in the afternoon sun, holding on to a 16-year-old girl who had decided months ago, and without announcement, that she was going to love this woman. That was not nothing. That was, in fact, almost everything. Ethan's phone buzzed. Novak. He answered. "You watching the news?" "No." "Verdict's already running. You and Lena are going to get calls." "I know." "You okay?" Ethan looked at Clara and Lena on the steps. Clara had stepped back, but kept one hand on Lena's shoulder, the way you keep a hand on something you've decided to take care of. Lena was looking out at the street with her face fully open for the first time since he'd known her. Not guarded, not braced, just present, just herself. "Yeah," he said. "I'm okay." "Good work, Caldwell." "Good work, Ray." He hung up and walked over to where they were standing. "Ready?" he said. Lena looked up at him. She was not the woman he'd lifted out of a rainstorm on Route 12. That woman had been terrified and alone and holding herself together by force of will, with nowhere to go. This woman, sitting straight in the afternoon sun, her father's name being written into a foundation that would outlast every person in this conversation. This woman had somewhere to go. Had people to go with. Had, against every effort of the woman now being led away in handcuffs, a life. "Yes," she said. "I'm ready." Clara slipped her hand into Ethan's as they walked toward the car, the way she used to do when she was small and the world felt too big. And he held it the way he always had, steady, without making a thing of it. The small daily act of a father telling his daughter, without words, "I'm here. I've got you. We're okay." Some things didn't need to be said out loud. They just needed to be done, every day, without stopping. That was the whole lesson. That was everything Richard Hartley had known and tried to live by, and had ultimately given his life protecting. You show up for the people you love. You carry what you can carry. And when someone is left alone in the rain on a dark road, you stop the car. You stop the car, and you don't drive away.